Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So I hope everybody's staying nice and warm. I have been waiting, guys, for some data that would compare the results from the new bivalent Omicron boosters to, well, let's say groups of people who have received those boosters to people who had received other boosters in the past. If you're like me, you're kind of tired of hearing about people who have had the updated Omicron booster are doing better than people who are not vaccinated at all. It's not a very helpful statistic because, first of all, in order to get this booster, it's a boost. You would have need to have been vaccinated at all. And second of all, that population is not interested in how they're doing compared to people who are not vaccinated at all because we're vaccinated. So it's really not been that helpful. I think it's more been like a packaging, marketing, selling kind of thing. And so I was really looking forward to finding out some information about how people have done who got that new Omicron booster versus people who didn't get boosted yet but had been vaccinated and boosted already. I can't say we're there yet. I didn't see something that specifically parses that out, but there was an Israeli study. It's a preprint now. It hasn't been peer reviewed yet. And I was going to talk about it today anyway, and then I noticed somebody put it in the Facebook group. I think it went up yesterday. Let me just give that a plug for those of you who are new to my channel. Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy also has a Facebook page, and there is an associated Facebook group that you can ask to join, and it's just a little more of an interactive discussion. And sometimes people put up like a problem or something, they want suggestions. It's a nice, helpful community. And so head on over to Facebook and ask to join that group for the discussion. But anyway, somebody put this up there, and it's part of the Israeli study because they have a very nimble healthcare system. It's a socialized system where everybody has an ID number. It's assigned to them at birth, so everybody's in a database, and it's really easy to study things in very large numbers. So that's why we got so much data early on in the pandemic about the vaccines to begin with. So they recently put up a preprint study that's for the Lancet, which is a very reputable publication, and I was really excited. And they said, I had first read a synopsis about it that said they showed that there is an 84% better protection for people against hospitalization in people who have gotten the updated bivalent booster over people who had not. But bear with me, I don't want to bury the lead. I'm a little disappointed in this study. There's something that I think is kind of flawed, and another thing that I think boils down to more marketing. It's just lacking in nuance, and I don't like that either. But anyway, so I clicked over to that to look at the study itself because I don't like to read a summary of a study. When I can read the study itself, I can look at how they did it, and I can look at their findings and how they calculated and things like that. So basically, I'm going to tell you how this study looked. So they took people who were diagnosed with COVID, and they limited this to people over 65 years old. So the study is looking at how well you can prevent hospitalization in people over 65 who do get COVID. So it's not about preventing the infection or preventing symptomatic disease. This is just about preventing hospitalization, specifically in a population over 65 years old. And what they did is they took a population sample of it turned out in this one, they have several different healthcare systems all in their umbrella of their nationalized healthcare, and that's how they create competition, which is brilliant in my opinion. So they took in the Clalit system something like 622,000 people were eligible to get the new bivalent booster. And out of that 622,000 people, only 85,000 chose to get that. Okay, so a very small, it's like 15%, only 14% actually, I think it was. So a very small proportion of that population decided to go ahead and get the monovalent booster. So I'm looking at my notes here so I don't make any mistakes because there's some large numbers we're dealing with. But at any rate, about 85,000 out of that 622,000 went ahead and got the bivalent booster. And so that's a very small minority. The rest of them, which would have been 537,000 people, decided not to get it. Now, here's the first issue. Out of that 537,000 who chose not to get that booster, they were eligible for it. So that doesn't tell us whether they only got the two-part series, whether they had one boost already, two boosts already. Those people are all in the same pool. Now, it doesn't include people who were completely unvaccinated because you had to have been eligible for the bivalent boost. So anyway, that group was 537,000 people. So what I have a problem with is the way they displayed the results. Even though they did show that there's better protection for the people who got the Omicron bivalent booster, they presented the result in raw numbers. So they said only 6 people in the group who got the bivalent booster needed to be hospitalized, whereas 297, so let's say 300, okay, just so that we have like nice round numbers, 300 people, so 6 versus 300. 300 people in the group of seniors who did not get the bivalent booster had to be hospitalized. Now, nobody died, by the way. Or maybe I think one person in one of the groups died and it wasn't statistically significant. So let's say no one died. Well, 6 does sound like it's a lot smaller than 300 or even 297. But the problem is that's a raw number. That's not the way to look at it because these groups are not the same size. It's like saying 1 in 10 versus 2 in 500 or something. It's not meaningful. You have to put this as a percent. So it's 6 out of 85,000. It's not just 6. And it's 300 out of 537,000. So when you looked at it like that, the risk if you got the bivalent booster was 0.0071%. That was your risk of hospitalization. And if you chose not to get the bivalent booster, it still was a lot higher, but it was 0.055%. So in one case, your chances were like 7 in 100,000, and the other one it was 55 in 100,000. So yeah, 7 in 100,000 is a lot better than 55 in 100,000. It's like an 8-fold protection, which is why they said it's such a high percentage more protection. But if you're not going to be myopic about it and you're really going to back up, and let's say your worst case scenario here is you don't take it and you've got 55 out of 100,000 chance that you're going to be hospitalized with this thing. If you're over 65, we're limiting it to over 65, that's not a statistic where if that's a disease that just appeared on the scene today and that was what it looked like, 55 out of every 100,000 people have to be hospitalized for it and no one dies, we wouldn't be scrambling around for vaccines at all. So I'm just going to drill down, like double down on what I said before. This is just for me, and I'm going to insert my usual disclaimer, which is that I'm not giving any individual medical advice on this channel. Nothing I say should be used as a substitute for the advice of your own practitioner. And I don't think this means you don't get the bivalent booster. I'm not even saying that. But I think that what this tells us is that this is a much more nuanced calculation. A couple years ago when young, healthy people were dying out of nowhere and we had, 30-something-year-olds on ECMO machines and we were running out of ECMO machines in hospitals and people were being flown places in medevacs where they could get on, an ECMO machine, which is a heart-lung bypass. That was a whole different calculation and that was worth taking a whole lot of risk. But at this point, it seems to me that the risk is so far reduced that it's become a lot more nuanced, at least for me. This is how I'm looking at it, and whether and when to get the boost, and I will eventually get a boost, and I'll get if I were to get it today, it would be the bivalent booster. I think I'm going to probably get it in the early spring because I'm going to be traveling, and let's face it, this thing offers profound protection for like a very short period of time, and after that, it wanes pretty quickly. So which 3 weeks do you want to be protected? I'm probably going to do it then. That's part of my risk-benefit analysis, but I just think it's time for a much more nuanced discussion about this, and I think that when you add in, really focus on the fact that this study that I've just mentioned was limited to people over 65. And in that group, you're going to see many more, health conditions like underlying conditions that you don't see in the population at large as much. I just really think that screams out for us to just back up a little bit and not have these very broad, very aggressive recommendations. So I've been reading a lot of Paul Offit. Paul Offit is actually has developed vaccines. He's an infectious disease doctor in Philadelphia, and he's on the advisory committee, the one that advises either the CDC or the FDA on whether to recommend a vaccine. And I get the CDC, and he was the only dissenting vote on these boosters. And he doesn't say that people shouldn't get it. He just says it's time for a more nuanced perspective that certain people should get this, and not everybody has to run out and get it, and certainly not 2 months after your last boost. So I'm on that bus at this point until I hear something different. This kind of research, while I appreciate that it's good research and it did show a statistically significant difference, it's the kind of thing that, like I said, because it's packaged with raw numbers where they said 6 versus 297 instead of just saying 7 in 100,000 versus 55 in 100,000, that just doesn't sound as dramatic. It seems to me that it's just more of the same marketing material. In addition to that, I will add in that in Israel, they have mostly Pfizer. It's a Pfizer study. And, here in this country, we have both Moderna and Pfizer, and it does seem that the Moderna has been more protective than the Pfizer. So this doesn't even account for that. This just really undermines, I think, the credibility of it. To me, it undermines the credibility of the people who sit on these boards and make these recommendations that I think at this point are just too broad. And yes, if I get COVID tomorrow, maybe I'll wish I got the vaccine yesterday. That's true, or 3 weeks before yesterday. But um since it wanes so quickly, and like I said, it's just a whole lot more nuanced than that. That's not the way to make a good decision. So for me, I'm still holding off for now. I'm coming up on, I think, I'm about 8 months. I've actually been boosted twice. Maybe in the next few months we'll see some more data, or somebody will be able to study how people who have had one boost versus two boosts do, and for how long. That would be really helpful to me. I suspect my deep humoral immunity, against severe disease and death is much more long lasting. If it weren't, we wouldn't be seeing data like what I've just quoted. We would be seeing more deaths, and it wouldn't be confined to people over 65. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. So somebody had put this article up in the Facebook group. It's going as a preprint. Like I said, it's not yet been peer reviewed. I wonder if people are going to indict this issue when people respond to it, when peers are able to make comments. I'm thinking about crafting my own response to it, but at any rate, let me hear about yours, and let me hear about what you guys think about this and what you're doing. And in the meantime, I would recommend that everybody just please have a discussion that kind of drills down, a very detailed discussion that brings into the picture your own history, your own risks, what the infection rate is in your area, how at risk are you, how much are you indoors with lots of people, how much are you able to mitigate some of the risks yourself, are you traveling, things like that, and have that discussion with your own practitioner. I'm that's kind of where I'm making my decisions going forward, and not so much with these broad all or nothing that are meant for 350 400 million people. So anyway, keep warm, and I'll see you guys next time. Be well.